Hi, this is the last panel of the day, and 3 of the 4 journalists have been previously introduced, but I have the great honor of introducing Britta von der Heide. And see, I even blew your last name, even though she was a WPI fellow in 2017, and so I know her well. I think their class always called me the boss. So, but Britta's worked a long time for the Hamburg Public Broadcasting TV station. Worked on a lot of big investigations, including Panama Papers. Some other ones like that, and now heads the investigations department made up of 60 or so individuals at your TV station. So, Britta, welcome. And I think everybody else has been introduced, so I'm going to turn this over to John Harris. This panel is on new journalistic platforms and ways to reach an audience. John?
Okay. Thanks, David. Paul, earlier I was talking a little bit about generational shifts in media, and I'm wondering whether we might have a generational divide, even on this very panel, in which case probably you and I, even though you've got a few years on me, might be on one side of the divide. And that is, we look at, I'll speak for myself, tend to look at this question of new platforms and ways to find a new audience a bit defensively. Oh man, do we have to? Yeah, and some of us really enjoyed text, thought we were pretty good at it, and so we regard this question as a bit of a chore. Do we have to? And then, of course, the answer is yes, we do, if we care about going where the audience is and satisfying them rather than satisfying ourselves. So that's a sort of a defensive view of it. But I think we've got 2 examples of people who've really approached the task more affirmatively, that this isn't just something you have to do, but it's something you want to do. There's great opportunity for creativity here. And so, in any event, we'll see as we get hear everybody's views, whether my hunch about that divide is real or not. Britta, because you are the newcomer, you haven't been on previous panels, I thought we might start with you. You have encountered challenges, you said, in our introduction just now, to reaching a new audience, and you've tell us about how you've surmounted those challenges, and then I think you've maybe got a little video presentation that you could set up and narrate for us.
Thank you very much, John. Yes, I'm very happy to be here. And in the morning you said something about everybody has his own circumstances. And I would like to describe it. Because, you see, a few days ago, the boss of Netflix said to a German magazine, "Oh, the linear classic television is not dead, it's alive." And I thought, oh, I'm lucky. What a relief, because I work for a television broadcaster. But then he went on and he said, okay, it's not dead now, but it will die, maybe in 10 years or something like that. Okay, I have to admit, in Germany, we have seen some signs. When I started working for my program, we had 20 million viewers. Nowadays, these days, we have 2 million. And of course, I can say 2 million is not so bad. I can also work for these 2 million. Okay, they're a little bit older people and people who still have a television, and I could be satisfied. But if I did this, a lot of people, 40 million, would be very upset with me, I think, because they are paying me. I work for the biggest German television broadcaster, and it is paid by the public, by the general public. And so these 40 million people are my employer. So, and as we are paid by everybody, I am committed to reach so many people as possible. So I have two good reasons to reach more people and to capture new platforms, because first, television will die maybe in 10 years or maybe in 12, doesn't matter. And the second reason is I have these 40 million employer. So, and I'm working for the investigative department, All the stories, or in the best case, the stories should be relevant and they should be exclusive. So, and in the case we have a good story, my main question every day is, okay, how do I bring this story to the people? How can I reach them with my good story? Traditionally, we do television, I told you about that, radio, and also we have some news websites. And then we started to go on Instagram, and we developed a program for YouTube for the younger people, and we also started to produce podcasts. And it feels like, Camilla told you about it in the afternoon, it feels like working like a mechanic, because you turn some screws, you try this, you try that, you fail, it's not working, the people don't like it, and stuff like that. So it's a big experience. And the biggest learning until now, and you both mentioned that, is that it's all about the story. It sounds very simple, but we did a lot of mistakes because we thought when we want to try to reach the younger people, we have to be very cool. So we used for our videos on YouTube, we used hip-hop music. The videos were very fast. And sometimes we even moved the camera so to pretend it's very exciting what you're seeing now. So you have to watch it. And we thought, oh, that's so cool. We were so cool. But the people said, no, sorry, you are not. It's not that what we want. We want authenticity. We want the real life. And we want to be on eye level with the reporter. So, and the younger people want a transparency. They want to see the reporter fail in between. They want to look behind the curtains, like you said, Camilla. And that's what we learned. So to tell the story, and it's all about the story. And maybe I can make a break here and tell you more about how we do it then, to tell the story later.
Sure. Okay. So are we going to play this video now or not now?
Like you won't. And then I should explain something more.
Why don't we come back to that?
Yeah.
And we'll get to the other panels. Camilla, you have been talking so much about audio, but it seemed to me, if I'm hearing you correctly, some of the other panels, really, you're making very similar points, right? About meeting. About authenticity, about meeting the audience where they are. And I was very struck by that phrase and that image of seeing the reporter eye to eye, that you're equals, but also giving access to some of the reporter's challenges and travails. Are there similar themes that traverse between video and audio?
Absolutely. And you know, I think it's so important, John, to, as Britta said, to stop thinking about platform-specific news and just think about news. I started out as a radio journalist 20 years ago. I was one of the most serious, hard-nosed radio news journalists in my newsroom. And I was not interested in the fun, fluffy stuff. I wasn't interested in experimentation. I just wanted to do the news. I still want to do the news, but over the years, as our newsroom went through several transitions, first, you know, we were single platform. So we were a newsroom that provided news to one radio station, and that was a talk radio station called 702, right? Then our newsroom was consolidated among 4 radio stations, and suddenly we were reporting for 2 talk radio stations and 2 music radio stations, and we had to change the style between the 2 types of radio station, right? Because what works on talk radio doesn't work on music radio with a much younger, funkier audience. From there, we launched a news website, and we again had to experiment. How do you move content from radio onto online and still have it be effective and efficient? And then how do you balance, you know, like what goes to radio first and what goes online first? And so I suppose through that process, I then started getting interested in, okay, what's next? So we've got the website, we've got the app, we've got 4 radio stations, what next? I think that question is incredibly valuable to ask as a journalist. And what's next to me always is this idea of meeting people where they are, as you say, but also fishing where the fish are, right? So the idea of, like, where do people live their lives? What digital spaces now are every bit as important as the physical spaces we inhabit? And how do we meet people there? And how do we talk to them there in a way that's not condescending, that's not aloof? Because people these days are expecting, I think, more and more to have that almost one-on-one relationship with a reporter rather than the voice of God coming down from the heavens.
Yeah. So, Paul, I think it's important to get you in this conversation for a couple of reasons. The work that ProPublica sponsors is brave investigative work in the classic American tradition. But it seems to me those pieces that are done in the classic traditions sometimes are really hard work for the audience. They demand a lot of the reader. We spent a year going into documents, interviewing everybody, and this is a complicated tale. So we want 90 minutes of your time. Especially a younger audience is really accustomed to getting information in shorter bursts. And also some of the most important stories, they're intellectually taxing, right? You need to sometimes an investigative tale is so outrageous that you can't wait to get to the bottom of it. And other times you read it and say, well, this is really important. I know it is. I know it's my responsibility as a citizen to understand this, but it's complicated. How have you, in your career and the journalists that you recruited to ProPublica when you were there, how are they grappling with this? Investigative work ideally should reach the maximum number of people, and it should use every tool possible to engage those people.
This is, has always been the challenge for this kind of journalism, even 50 years ago. How do you get them to read it? Well, you find a narrative that is exciting unto itself, and it sort of sneaks up on them, and they get involved with it, and all of a sudden you've caught them. And we had a particular kind of this challenge more recently in the first couple of years of ProPublica, 2008, 2009, there was something totally designed to put readers to sleep. It was something called CDOs, collateralized debt obligations. It turned out that our financial reporters were able to find sources that would give them information that would let them track through how these devices were used to defraud the public, to create huge exacerbation of the terrible 2008, 2009 recession, and the use of these devices, which no ordinary human being had ever heard of and had ever handled, but it was something that caused them tremendous problem. Well, we were working with a radio team, and they were marvelous in finding ways that you could bring this down to the ordinary reader. One of our radio compatriots, is a public radio in the U.S., said, this scam is the same scam that was used in a very famous play and Broadway play and then movie called The Producers. And the scam was to create a play that was determined to fail, The play was titled "Springtime for Hitler." That sounds like something that you would run away from. You would not want to see. Okay, and a key part of this play was these two schlemiels from Broadway were sitting down and singing a song describing the scam. And so what our friend said, why don't we get a couple of songsters, would-be Broadway songsters, to come up with a parody of the song from the play where these two characters describe the scam. So they wrote a parody of this song that was hilarious, and the radio folks made this a centerpiece of a 25-minute radio program that described how this scam worked. And it got people in their cars to listen about what was happening with collateralized debt obligations, and they stayed with the joke, and then when they got home, they turned to their computers, dialed into ProPublica, and read the text.
Read the damn piece.
And it was something that, if we didn't have these partners, we would never have thought of ourselves. But it ended up being a Pulitzer Prize winning piece of investigative journalism, because it made it possible to understand this evil scam. It provided evidence that helped the Securities Exchange Commission and prosecuting Justice Department attorneys raise something like, I forget the exact number, something like $300 million in fines. And we suggested they might give us 10%
To fund more journalism.
They didn't. They didn't swallow that. But the point is that if you're stuck in your car, okay, you can always change the station. But if you hear this song going on and you kind of wonder where it's leading, we've got you. We have caught you. And so first you've got to get the goods.
Yeah.
And that took tremendous digging. But then when you've got the goods, how do you get people to eat the meal? And you start with the dessert.
Yeah. So you had fun with an investigative piece.
Yes.
But I thought that was against the rules.
And a footnote: these two characters that wrote this parody of this song and then sang it and recorded it, we would never be able to afford now, because the next project they did was something called the Book of Mormon, which was a Broadway
huge hit
show. That was a huge hit, and that was made into a movie. And now anything these guys do, they get paid much more than we can.
Well, maybe they would do pro bono work. Was there any debate within ProPublica among the reporters and editors who thought this was too irreverent for their solemn work, or did everybody feel like, oh, we maybe have a hit on our hands?
The first reaction actually came from our lawyers, who their first instinct was, my God, we'll be sued, forever. But then ProPublica's president, a guy named Dick Toffel, who is also a publishing lawyer. He's got 3 degrees from Harvard, but he read the script, and he made 2 little changes and started laughing. So it got past the lawyers, and then we knew we could get away with it.
I want to see this video that we've been promised, and I know you maybe need to set it up a little bit. And inspired by Paul's story, maybe you would sing to set up your video.
You don't want that.
Okay. Well, we'll go with more traditional voice format.
Yes, please. Yes, so I said everything is all about the story is important, and the story is that what counts. And the next step for us is what part of the story do we tell on which platform. So I have to reach the audience. How do I do that? And to illustrate that, I would like to show you a video. It's about a recent story we launched a few weeks ago, and it's from investigative reporter, my colleague John. John is working for my company, and she's German-American citizen, and she's specialist in national security. And it is the outcome of maybe 4 years research, and it is about a man who was the son of a camel shepherd. His name is Mohamedou Slahi, and he's from Mauritania, Africa, and he lived in Germany for years. He studied there, and suddenly it turned out that he was suspected to be the one who recruited the main terrorist for 9/11. The CIA was convinced he's the man, he's part of the conspiracy, and they detained him for 14 years in Guantanamo without accusation, without process. And John made a story about him because he wanted to meet his torturers. Yes, and I would like to play the video now. Thank you very much.
I'm on my way to meet someone I think of as a friend. But in reality, we've never even met. Because since I've known him, he's been a prisoner in Guantanamo Bay.
Slahi was never charged with a crime despite 14 years imprisonment. A US federal judge ordered his release, and now he returns home to a hero's welcome.
I don't want to sleep, because when I sleep, I get right away nightmares. I imagine the next interrogation, what it's look like. How is they going to torture me?
I soon found out that Mohamedou had a reason he wanted to see me. He's not finished with what happened to him at Guantanamo. He has a plan. And I suddenly realize he thinks that I can actually help him. His plan is that I should go out and find them for him.
So, I'm really into German Aktenordner. That's one of the things I love about Germany is Aktenordner. Right? They have these wonderful. I want to show you some pictures. Mm-hmm. You know who that is?
No.
It's Mr. X.
He broke my rib cages.
He broke your ribs?
Yeah. He almost killed me twice. And I kept telling them, you don't know that I cannot take this anymore. Yes. Yeah, he hurt me a lot.
Did you torture?
Yeah, it's torture.
He's very charismatic, and he's very manipulative, and he did exactly what bin Laden needed him to do for 9/11. Are you ready, Mohamedou?
I don't know, it depends.
What does it depend on?
How are you living now? So are you married? Do you have kids?
I'm not going to talk about my family. I'm not going to talk about my family, man. I'm not going to talk about my family or where I am or what I do or don't do.
I really want revenge. Do I want to kill him? Do I want to apply the same pain on him? what? So and I found it, this is ridiculous. So the best revenge, my best revenge was to forgive. Give me back control, you know. And I said, wow, this is good. This feels good.
So forgiveness is an act of revenge.
Yes, absolutely. The best act of revenge.
So I showed you this video because this story was perfect or is perfect for different platforms. And I would like to explain because, of course, this was from the classic documentary. And in the documentary, we were able to tell the whole story, especially the law side. And on the YouTube platform, we concentrated on the two characters, Mr. X, the torturer, and Slahi, the one who was being tortured. And then the research of John to find the torturers, and then the face-to-face meeting. The young people loved that because it is emotional, and they learned a lot about 9/11. And on the Insta story, we just concentrated on the face-to-face meeting of Slahi and his torturers. And on the news, television and radio, we just had the one piece that the torturer admitted, yes, it was torture, because maybe you remember the US always said, no, it's just enhanced interrogation. So we had also a big news. And my favorite one was a podcast. We did 12 episodes, 6 hours, because there we were able to tell every detail, especially about the connection from Slahi and Al-Qaeda. This was very, very exciting. And we challenged John, the reporter, because the host was able to ask him, okay, John, why do you think he's guilty? Why do you behave like you're a friend? You're a journalist. Don't forget that. What are the reasons that you think he's not guilty? And stuff like that. So we challenged John for 6 hours, and that was very exciting. So
interesting. Let me follow on that, Camilla, because many of these new platforms, as they achieve intimacy, it seems to me they do so in part by connecting with the emotional core of a story, and yet the most challenging journalism also has to connect at the cerebral level, not just the emotional level. Do these new platforms allow that? Do they allow you to connect with the brain as well as the heart simultaneously, or do they lean one way or the other in your experience?
You know, John, I think the most important thing to remember about new platforms, for me anyway, is that new platforms are a way of amplifying traditional journalism, but the real challenge on new platforms is that they actually challenge news brands in a way to become human. And we need to be able to meet that challenge and become more human and more relatable while still maintaining the credibility, the trust, the loyalty of our listeners, our viewers, our readers, our audience. And I think that is a challenge that many are grappling with at the moment. I think there's a glut almost of experimentation in terms of conversational news, explainer journalism, bringing humor into things, bringing emotion, highlighting emotion, because for so long we were told that was not what we should do. And so there's a huge push in a way to explore that. I hope that, like a pendulum swinging, we'll eventually find a happy medium. And I think we're on our way there already. I think that we have to balance that need for connection and that drive for developing a certain brand personality with the facts and the traditions of journalism and the necessities of journalism.
Paul, I want to go to you, but as I do, just an observation that in a sense there's nothing new under the sun. I remember hearing Don Hewitt talk about the show 60 Minutes. Of course, now that I think launched in 1968, and of course it's been an institution now for 54 years. But he said, look, the thing to realize about that show is it's not really a show about the stories. It's a show about reporters covering the stories. And they did complicated subjects, usually 3 in an hour, so they never lasted more than 20 minutes. So some of the things that we're talking about as innovations, and they are innovations, but there's never a brand new innovation because that platform, a really powerful traditional platform, has been doing some of the things we're talking about here for a half century.
No, this is what I wanted to get to. In the 60s, before you guys were born, journalism began using the power of narrative. It was still text, but people were telling stories with a human core, with a beginning, a middle, and an end. And part of the reporting challenge was to not only to prove the journalistic point of the story, but then to report out the narrative. And what I found as we were using these essentially magazine techniques in journalism was that sometimes the reporters would spend more time trying to nail down the narrative and less time trying to prove the journalistic point. And not only that, they would seduce themselves into not going into a reporting alley that would turn up something that would weaken the narrative, change it from a black and white narrative to a narrative with grays. And so it became an important part of the editing and coaching and training process to understand that if you want to write great narrative fiction, okay, write great narrative fiction. But if you're using the techniques of fiction to put across journalism, you have to be sure you commit to the process of journalism. You open the doors that may lead you to something that will turn your story into a gray story, into a black and white story. That's and whether you're doing it in text or whether you're doing it in multi-platform, if we're going to use the parody of a song from a play, we better be sure that the fundamental underpinnings of the story are there.
And the only thing I would add to that is that I would love a great narrative in the hands of a great storyteller, but in the hands of a mediocre storyteller, sometimes I want to lop off that long anecdotal lead. I found it, the start of the stories here in paragraph 6.
Yeah, it's often the best way to start a story is with a hard news lead.
Yeah. Camilla, you've got some multimedia as well. Maybe you could introduce that, and then once we pivot from that, let's get the audience in on this as well.
Sure, absolutely. So, John, I think one thing to mention here as well is the idea that new platforms are ways of reaching new audiences. Many of our new audiences are very young. And I think one of the challenges that journalism is facing now, more so than ever, it has faced it for many years, I'm sure, but now more so than ever, it seems that we are competing in an attention economy in ways perhaps that we haven't had to before. So, the newsrooms that I work in, we don't see our competition as other newsrooms. We see our competition often as social media or Netflix or entertainment television stations. We are competing for people's attention. And we need to be able to package our very valuable and very important information in ways that allow us to compete for that attention. I think that's a real struggle that we're having as journalists at the moment. I think it's the New York Times famously that refers to it as candy-coated broccoli. So you want people to eat their broccoli, but the way to do it is to dip it in candy for them, right? So I suppose my my little video is a bit of candy to get people to eat their broccoli. It's very simple, text to video, which is a very exciting format for many newsrooms at the moment. And it deals with an experiment that I did in my traditionally radio newsroom a few years back, and that was delivering news to people via WhatsApp. And we talk about, meeting people where they are and fishing where the fish are. And this WhatsApp experiment was born out of an interest in how absolutely ubiquitous WhatsApp is in South Africa, as it is in much of Europe. I don't think it's gaining traction in the US, but I think it's still quite a way behind. But WhatsApp is on every single person's phone, and we're on it multiple times a day. And we wanted to see if there was a chance to meet people on that platform, and how would we do it? And what we did was we looked at the way people engage on WhatsApp, and how do we craft news that might live on a platform like that. And what we found was that the traditional way of doing news, the sort of facts first way of doing news, devoid of personality, devoid of cheek, put it like that, simply wouldn't work on a platform like that, because it relies on intimacy. Everyone's kind of in on the joke. So that's just a little preamble to the video, which is just a distillation of some of my thoughts, I suppose, around new platforms.
Bring on the broccoli.
Very fast.
Yeah, Paul.
On this point about you're competing not just against other news, but anything that shows up on the screen. And I was, for some reason, I was on YouTube. It must have been the football game I was watching got boring or something. But lo and behold, I saw something called Victory at Sea. Victory at Sea was something that NBC News did in cooperation with the U.S. Navy in the early 1950s, and it was using war footage, showed the pathway through World War II from the perspective of the Navy, and it was a huge hit for NBC News, and very dramatic with music and all kinds of war footage. But here is something done in the 1940s and 1950s, using a lot of footage that was shot in the early 40s, and it's competing against the most modern things that we're doing, and the technology allows the competition that we're dealing with to be as broad as that.
Thank you. So let's check out that video, and then let's get some of your questions ready. like it.
Short and sweet, 80 seconds.
Yeah.
That's what the
Good,
stats
good.
tell us we should stick to.
Let's see if some people here have some questions for us. Well, they're thinking of some. I've got a question for you.
You've got a hand
Oh, there it is. Yes, sir.
It's just the question, is this experiment still going on, the WhatsApp experiment?
Because of regulation in South Africa, sadly, we had to shut it down about a year and a half ago. But it was the longest running and the most successful WhatsApp news service in South Africa for a good couple of years.
Would you have continued it?
Absolutely, it was the So what was so special about this project, to me personally, but also I think to our newsroom, is that we were so used to being very serious and detached on our radio platforms and on our online properties. This gave us a chance to be human, and the relationships that we were able to build with people were remarkable. One of the things that always surprised me was how people would respond when we made mistakes, which we inevitably did, right? We're humans, we're not robots. So there were mistakes every now and then. And when we had to send out, it's the most mortifying thing you have to do as a journalist, right? Send out a correction to several tens of thousands of people, sometimes hundreds of thousands of people. If you do it on social media, you get attacked left, right, and center. And we were so worried when we had to do it on WhatsApp that this very precious community of ours might react in the same way. And instead, they did the opposite. They accepted when we apologized, for the most part. They were very generous and they were very understanding because we had talked to them with empathy and humanity and personality, and so they responded to us in the same way. And I think in an age of increasing polarization and outrage, that kind of connection is so valuable in journalism. So I'd do it again in a heartbeat. It was also just enormous fun.
If take a guess, if 15 years from now somebody who's maybe themselves are just a young person, not even in journalism yet, but they come back and view the tape of our panel, what things do you think we're saying that they might look back on and say, oh, that was really smart, that caught the next wave of where media was headed? And probably there'd be some things that they're saying, well, that would just elicit eye rolls. That was, that we sound absurd. Yeah. It's like the long sideburns people had in the 1970s or something like that. What were they thinking?
I mean, that's an enormous question, isn't it? I'm not a great crystal ball gazer, but I will say that I think, I mentioned it in previous panel that I've been working on a podcast about the future recently. And one of the points that someone who's paid to think about the future made that really stuck with me was the idea that we're likely to see more progress in the next 15 years than we've seen in the last 150. Which is a startling claim and may not be borne out. But either way, as we move into a more digital world and as the rate of progress increases, I mean, there are some estimates that the rate of progress and development is going to increase fourfold in the next few decades. I think what will still ring true 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now is connection and humanity. Yeah. Emoji, they'll probably see as that's the eye roll moment, right? Mm-hmm. Using a mobile device, eye roll moment. I'm sure all of those things will become obsolete, but what won't go away, and what I think has been a thread through journalism since its inception, is that idea of connection and humanity.
Britta, I want to follow up on something Camilla said, which is on some platforms, they're just so angry. Many of the new platforms, they seem to raise the temperature rather than increase the light. And they're platforms for insult, indignation, conspiracy theory, malice, all those things. Do you see a counter to that? Might some of these new platforms and new methods of telling stories actually start to go the other way and bring down the temperature and allow connection between people who don't necessarily agree?
It's a good question. We made some bad experiences with Facebook. Especially our stories are very, very critical or against the government, stuff like that. But the follower on Facebook are really aggressive with us. So I don't know why it is, but it's really a big problem. So we are thinking now to leave Facebook, and it's really because it is very hard for us to answer everybody. They attack us, and we ask ourselves, why have we to answer these bad attacks? So we haven't left yet, but we are thinking about it. But I think what Camilla said, that the communication is very important. The young people on YouTube, by the way, they tell us we want to communicate. If we don't answer something, they're angry with us, but they are open-minded, and if they have another opinion or against us, they accept it. So if we explain, but they don't want to have this one-way road. I think we don't have to be on every platform. When it's too angry and when there's people we are not able to convince or something, I don't want to go there anymore.
Interesting. Paul?
I mean, I think it's interesting to remember that in the sort of the later decades of the 19th century, many newspapers had Democrat or Republican in their names. In other words, they were designed from the get-go to be partisan and to find, using the techniques of the day, stuff that would support that approach. And then the owners of the New York Times, towards the end of the 19th century, the beginning of the 20th, they adopted this all the news that's fit to print motto. And what that was a code for was, we're going to pull back from the passion and the one-sidedness and give you more sober stories that you can rely on for making your life decisions. And it was a fundament for the financial success of the New York Times, even as the great yellow journalists of the era, the publisher saying to his reporter and artist in Cuba, when he telegraphed saying, "Sir, I'm not finding the atrocities you said I was going to find," and he sent back, "You provide the images, you provide the pictures, I'll provide the war."
Yeah.
And against that, you had the New York Times and some others saying, maybe what we want to do, it may be a little bit gray, but it's a pathway that can be a success for us, and it turned out to be a success for them.
Yeah. I got a final question, but before I do my final question, let me see if anybody in the audience has got one last question. I think maybe, where do I see these? If they're, doesn't look like there are. Okay. Well, Paul, we're going to finish with you because what you just said prompted a question in my mind. Before you were a founder of ProPublica, you were managing editor, or was that your title, at the Wall Street Journal. And let's say you were still the managing editor of the Wall Street Journal and you got invited to sit at this conference and view this panel. And I imagine you would be thinking, like, we can't cover everything, right? That's probably we can't chase every trend. That's probably a recipe for dilution and failure. What's our Instagram strategy? We should be doing more on TikTok, you name it. On the other hand, if you just sat there and did nothing, you'd be obsolete. So if you were running the Wall Street Journal and came back from this conference, you'd say, we need to get to work on blank.
saying, if I'm in my old chair at the Wall Street Journal.
I say the Wall Street Journal because that's an established institution. It's got its audience has very probably clear expectations of why they subscribe to the Wall Street Journal. They probably wouldn't. Wall Street Journal readers probably wouldn't want you going after every trend. I don't think Politico readers are interested in going after every trend, but that doesn't mean they want us to stand still.
And I think the answer to that is, I don't think the readers of the Wall Street Journal want the Wall Street Journal to go back to its 1935 approach when it was, mostly market news. The thing that they had to worry about each day was calculating the Dow Jones Industrial Average, which was much more challenging in those days than it is in the era of computers. But I think that what I'd be doing is what they're doing now, which is trying to keep remember to stick to your knitting. That's very important. But to try to use more techniques of storytelling that include more visual aids, more use of graphics, more use of interactive techniques, taking advantage of the fact that increasingly more and more of their readership is online, and less of it is in the print paper.
Britta, Camilla, what happened? Did Paul pass the audition? How does that answer sound?
I think the point about visual journalism is so well made. I really do think so. I think of all the trends that are going to stick and all the trends that matter, this new opportunity that we have with digital journalism to present big data, complicated information in visual and engaging formats is something that is vital for newsrooms to get right, no matter what platform you're on. I think that idea of visual journalism is incredibly powerful to me.
Britta, last word here.
Of course, it's my business, so to make videos. So I think the same. And I also think that something is changing. We don't need, like in the past, we don't need the high-end camera or stuff like that. We go with our mobile phones. So we do a lot of more work with that. And I think we have to make more experiences with that and experiments. And I think this is a good way also for the younger people. And yes, we just don't be afraid to fail, I think.
Well said. Thank you all. Thank you, and thanks to our panel. Thanks very much.